What up, everybody? This is Mr. View, and we are leaving Mother Russia today. We're getting out of Dodge. Remember, we just started learning about the Russian Revolution a couple of days ago and why they revolted. They were very backwards. Not a lot of people had money. And so the communists were able to gain power by saying everybody's going to be equal and everybody's going to have peace and love and bread, and it's going to be great. But we found out that slowly turned into some bad stuff happening, especially with Joseph Zhugashvili, who became Joseph Stalin, man of steel, right? He held these great purges and he starved people to death, and he got rid of just as many people, probably more, than that guy named Adolf Hitler in Germany. So Stalin was this monster, but he did make Russia a superpower. The Soviet Union became a very, very strong country, if you will, and one of our people that we were really scared of for a long time because their authoritarian government was very different than our democracy. Remember that totalitarian government where they use propaganda and censorship and terror and secret police and all these things that we didn't like over in our democracy in America. So we've got Soviet Union, but we're leaving them. We out. Now we're going to be dealing with some other countries. And remember, I talked about imperialism and how one country would control another. And these colonies fought for these mother countries in World War I, right? And they thought, hey, if we fight for this mother country, we're going to get our independence. But no, these mother countries, they needed that free stuff after World War I because they were decimated, right? Their countries had been destroyed. A lot of the men were dead. So they needed these little countries or these colonies to support them. And that upset a lot of these littler countries. There were a bunch of revolts throughout the world. It wasn't just in Russia where the Russians revolted. The Mexicans revolted too. And then a lot of African countries, we've talked about how bad things were with King Leopold and Belgium, but there were other countries that were just as upset. Egypt revolted, Kenya revolted, and then some Middle Eastern countries like Turkey and Iran, they revolted. And so the world was kind of an upheaval, although it wasn't a world war. A lot of uprisings within countries were happening because things were just not fair, not equal, and some of these mother countries were controlling little countries in a bad way. And in walks Mohandas Gandhi, right? You've heard of Gandhi before. Today we're going to learn about him. We're going to spend some time on his country, India. And it was controlled by England at this time, right? And we always like to think of England as this pious country, this country that maybe does good things instead of bad things. Well, here they are controlling India, much like they controlled America before we became the United States. So they're controlled by England, and India had actually fought for England during World War One. They thought, hey, we're going to fight for England. England's going to give us our independence. It's going to be all good. But no, they didn't get their independence after World War One. They thought they were promised it. They did not get it. So their people were upset, and they would hold these rallies. But the English outlawed rallies, right? They outlawed protests or large gatherings of people. Not in America, right? We can have these big protests. But back then, they said, no, India, you can't have these large meetings and you can't protest. This led to the Amritsar massacre in 1919, just after World War One. English soldiers fired on a group of protesters. These people were just this large meeting, right? And a lot of people were around there. And English soldiers fired on them. They said, you can't meet here. Even though they weren't armed or anything else, they fired on these people. 379 people died and 1,100-ish were injured. And it was nothing else than holding this public meeting and maybe doing a little talking about, hey, we should get out of England's shadow. Well, here comes Gandhi. Gandhi actually had studied law in England and he practiced law in another country called South Africa, which had its own issues, right? He practiced this thing called civil disobedience. He believed that if there is an unjust law, that you should protest that law. And so he did, but he did it non-violently. It was very non-violent. He did not like the caste system, even though he was Hindu. He did not like the caste system. He didn't like that some people were up here and some people were down here. So he didn't like the caste system. He thought all people should be equal, including women. Right? And And he thought that by the power of love, even the worst person could be turned good. What do you think? You think that even the worst person could be turned good? I don't know about that. But that's what he believed. He boycotts English goods. He didn't like the fact that England was saying, you've got to buy our stuff at our price, and you can only sell stuff to us and at our price. And he said, that's not fair. We should be able to buy from France if it's cheaper over there. Or we should be able to sell to France if they want to pay more. But England said, no, you got to sell to us, you got to buy from us. And so they didn't like that, especially when it came to salt. Salt was a very valuable commodity back then, right? It preserved food, and obviously it tastes really good, but they couldn't use their own salt. They had to buy salt from the English. And he's like, this is crazy. There's a sea over there and it's got a lot of salt in it. We should just be able to use that, not buy English salt. The English said no. He said, hey, England, I'm going to march 240 miles to that sea and I'm going to pick up some salt. What are you going to do? And so he starts marching. He starts off with 78 people in his group, and thousands of people join him in his little protest march to the sea. He gets to the sea, he holds up some salt, and he says, basically, I'm going to be protesting from here on out. England says, no, you're not. You're going to jail. And bam, he was arrested. Protesters that followed him used nonviolence, and they would meet up with these English soldiers purposely. Right? They would march right toward the soldiers, knowing they're going to catch a beating and knowing that bad things were going to happen. They're either going to be arrested, beaten, or killed. So not good things were going to happen. But they wanted the world to see that they were being nonviolent and use that tactic to make the world outraged. And the world, when they saw this stuff, they were outraged. When reporters went over there and saw this stuff and reported it to the rest of the world, people didn't like the English very much, based on what they were doing to these people who were not fighting back. And so Gandhi had a huge impact on not only his own country of India or the people of India, but throughout the world because they saw his nonviolent protests, including some of those guys in America, right, that saw how he protested and how effective it was. You'd think that they gained their independence real quick. They didn't. It wasn't until after World War II that India did gain their independence. So, although he did some great things, it didn't work for a long time. Right? Good luck with the assignment today. It's not that hard. It's harder than yesterday, though. I'll give you that. So, just to summarize a little bit, a bunch of countries revolted after World War I. They wanted their independence. They wanted other countries out. And those countries included Mexico, some African countries, Turkey, Iran, and then, of course, the ones we talked about today, India and their guy, Gandhi. I will talk to you soon. Bye.